It tore me apart. But I learned an important lesson. You can't count on anyone.
So Genshin's 5.3 banner is dropping very soon, and I've seen a ton of people excited about Mavuika, Citlali, Lanyan, the Chronicled Wish banner, Arlecchino, Chlorind reruns. I've seen people excited for all these things, but what I've barely seen people really talk about is the Pyro MC. We're getting a new Traveler, and no one's really talking about it. And I kind of get why. Hydro MC was an excuse of a character. They literally don't do anything for anyone. So people's expectations were probably either really low or really high because of how much we waited for Pyro MC. Normally we would have got this character on Notland release, but they have been holding it for as long as they have. It's kind of interesting. So after all the waiting we've had to do, is Pyro MC actually good? And it's a bit complicated. So let's start off with their kit and what they actually do and how good it is. Starting with their elemental skill, because no one gives a fuck about the normal attacks. If you're normally attacking on Pyro MC, you are griefing. What their tap E does is it makes the Pyro MC enter their Night Soul Blessing state, and it puts a ring of fire that follows the current active character. It's pretty much just Xiangling ult, except it does a lot less damage and it has worse ICD. The ICD for this is every 2.5 seconds. You're applying Pyro every 2.5 seconds. While Xiangling has 0 ICD, she applies it as much as it hits. However, this higher ICD, in the teams where it actually matters, it isn't that big of a deal. And we'll kind of get into that later when we talk about the team options. But yeah, the ICD is lower than Xiangling. However, it's not like detrimental. It's not making this ability suck ass. They also have a hold E variant of this skill, which instead of putting a ring of fire that follows your active character, it does Night Soul aligned power damage to nearby opponents every 3 seconds. It's not coordinated attack damage like Dea, so you don't need to actively hit something to trigger this. It just does it on its own. And this is raw assumptions, but I'm going to assume the AoE for this is bigger than the AoE from the fire ring. So yeah, in a team where application does matter, you're not using this ability, but it's not bad. The scaling is also higher than the tap E. It's like quadruple. However, the scaling is still bad. Like, don't expect good damage from this character. They're not really built as a damage dealer. But yeah, the hold E is something you can do, and it's not entirely worthless, which we'll also get into when we talk about the teams. And then the final part of their skill is their Night Soul Blessing and how it actually works. They continuously consume Night Soul points when their skill is active, and their Night Soul Blessing state can last up to 12 seconds maximum, which means their off-field power application will last for a maximum of 12 seconds. And you can only do either the tappy or the hold E. You can't do both. It doesn't let you do both. Sadly, you can only do one or the other, so you gotta kind of make that decision on what you want to do more than the other. If we were to compare this to Xiangling's ult at C0, it has a higher duration. Xiangling's ult at C0 has a 10-second duration, while this has a 12-second duration. But a lot of people don't have C0 Xiangling. A lot of people have her really good C4, which increases the duration by 40%, just making it longer by 2 seconds. It makes it go to 14-second duration, while Pyro MC is 12. So you get an extra 2 seconds on Xiangling's ultimate. However, the cooldown on Pyro MC's ultimate is shorter than Xiangling's by 2 seconds, so that can kind of help with rotations that you would want to end quicker. Like there's times where you play Xiangling and your ult is on cooldown when you want to use it, and then you're just like, oh shit, I'm fucked. Now I'm just standing here like a dumbass. So it is nice that the Pyro MC does have a shorter cooldown, even if the duration isn't as long as Xiangling's. Also, the burst cost isn't 80. Xiangling's burst cost is 80, which is why she needs 50 billion energy. Pyro MC's burst cost is 60, so they don't have as much of an ER problem as Xiangling does, which is another nice bonus. Moving on to their ultimate, it's pretty simple in what it actually does. It's just a AoE hit of damage with somewhat okay scaling, but you don't really play this character as a DPS, so the fine scaling doesn't end up really mattering in the grand scheme of things. More importantly though, after using this ult, for the next 4 seconds, the Traveler will restore 7 Night Soul points to themselves per second. This results in 28 Night Soul points restored after 4 seconds, which is really important in, for example, a Mavuika team who cares heavily about Night Soul point consumption. In other teams, this doesn't really matter that much. It'll also increase your skill duration, which is pretty nice, since your skill duration has a max of 12, but that does scale off how much Night Soul points you have. So this restoring your Night Soul would naturally make your skill get to that 12-second maximum a lot quicker. Their first passive is a increase to the AoE of their elemental skill if you're over 20 Nitro points, which generally you will be, so that's a nice bonus to make it so your power application is easier to trigger. And the talent 2 is after the active character triggers a power related reaction while the Pyro MC's elemental skill is active, which this will just trigger. This is going to happen. Pyro MC will gain 5 energy every 12 seconds, and if a party member triggers Nitro Burst as well, they will gain an additional 4 energy. So if you're playing in Notland teams, this gives you at least 9 energy, and if you're playing non-Notland teams where Pyro MC is the only Notland character, it only gives you 5. But this is nice. More energy is nice to lower their ER requirements, considering their elemental burst cost is 70, and it's not completely useless. And then if you further combine this with the scroll set and Fav, which is just their best weapons and relics, you'll need a lot less ER to burst every rotation, and you probably wouldn't even need like that many substats, like maybe 10 to 20% substat, and you'll be able to burst every rotation with no problem. Now on to the Constellations. This is where Pyro MC starts to actually sort of shine outside of simply just Pyro application and becomes more competitive with the other 4-star options. Their Constellation 1 is after using Pyro MC's elemental skill, the active character will deal 6% increased damage, and if they are in Night Soul, aka a Night Soul character, a Notland character, they will gain an additional 9% damage bonus, which gives you a total of 15% damage bonus if you're playing with a Notland carry, or just 6% damage bonus in a non-Notland carry. You combine this with the scroll set, which means Pyro MC will give 55% damage bonus with a Notland character and 46% damage bonus on just the normal carry, which is pretty good. For example, Kachina was used in teams where she did literally nothing but proc scroll and it worked because scroll is just really good. 40% damage bonus is huge. Having that additional 15% damage bonus in specific teams puts her even higher above a character like Kachina who already had uses. So pretty good C1. Onto the C2, after using Pyro MC's elemental skill, when the active character triggers a power related reaction, Pyro MC will gain 14 Nitro points up to a max of 28 Nitro points, since this can trigger twice, and it's very easy to trigger, which means your Nitro consumption is even better, which makes your Mavuika team with Pyro MC even better, and the max uptime for your E will be even easier to achieve. You'll get to that 12-second uptime very easily. And then the rest of the cons are useless. They just buff Pyro MC's raw damage. Like if you're playing on-field DPS Pyro MC, like it buffs the normals and it gives them power damage bonus, which doesn't really matter. Again, this character doesn't matter damage-wise. It's really just the buffing. So to give a kind of TLDR rundown on what this character is, they are basically a Xiangling with less power application, less personal damage, but instead they're less reliant on their elemental burst, and it's a lot easier to get their burst back compared to Xiangling, on top of being a supportive focused character that gets an even bigger benefit when being played with Notland characters. So how many team options does this character actually have? Are they just a niche Xiangling side grade, or do they have actual teams where they really shine? Well, starting off with their, in my opinion, best in slot team option being Mualani, they're very, very good actually with her specifically. Pretty much the reasoning why Pyro MC is so good with Mualani and why, in my opinion, she'll be her best teammate, obviously excluding Mavuika. For this entire team list, Mavuika is just better than Pyro MC. Like Mavuika's support is just Pyro MC but better. So like I'm speaking in a world where you don't have Mavuika or you don't want to use her as support. So in that world where you don't have Mavuika on this team as a support, Pyro MC is the next best option. Now this is because even though their power application, like I said earlier, isn't as good as Xiangling's, they don't have 0 ICD. Mualani doesn't actually need 0 ICD. As long as you can hit every like 2.5 seconds, which they do, they hit every 2.5 seconds, they apply every 2.5 seconds, Mualani can vape every hit of her big shark attack, which is what really matters. This also depends on if you're running a second Hydro that applies Hydro like Farina. In my opinion, I don't like Farina with Mualani because even with Xiangling, you'll get vape stolen by Farina. I think Candace is just a better option. Anyways, another benefit that Pyro MC has over, for example, Xiangling, Mualani's next best option, is that Pyro MC actually gives a damage increase. Normally in a Mualani team, all Xiangling is doing is applying Pyro. Xiangling doesn't give Mualani a buff, and Xiangling doesn't do any damage because there's no Bennett on the team, and you're building 50,000 ER, so you can't even invest in offensive stats. So if we're taking damage entirely out of the conversation, what Pyro MC does that Xiangling can't is that damage bonus. If you put Pyro MC on scroll, that's 40% damage bonus. Then you add the extra 15% damage bonus from their Constellation 1, because Mualani is an island character, they get the maximum amount of damage bonus. You're now giving Mualani 55% damage bonus, which is just something Xiangling cannot do. So Pyro MC is giving enough Pyro App, and they're giving 55% more damage, and they don't have the restriction of needing 50 million ER and 2 fabs to actually give the Pyro App. Pyro MC's application is on their skill, so it's just overall not only a more comfortable team, but it just gives you more damage because Pyro MC actually buffs your damage. Now you might be thinking, what if I'm playing Xiangling on this team and I have Xiangling on scroll? Well, you can just run Petra on Xiangling. I know a lot of people don't like Petra because you have to pick up the crystal, but from my personal experience, it's been very easy to pick up the crystal on Xiangling. So I think it's not even that cope of an option, and it makes it so your Pyro MC can actually buff while your Xiangling is also buffing. So I think that will just be Mualani's best team, with Pyro MC on scroll, Xiangling on Petra, and then a flex slot, preferably being Canvas in my opinion, because Canvas gives a fuck ton of normal damage bonus for Mualani and doesn't mess with Pyro application whatsoever because she applies 0 Hydro. On to her second best team, in my opinion, it would be Mavuika. However, only if you don't have Sitlali or Xiangling. This is because, obviously, if you have Sitlali or Xiangling, you're just going to use them instead. They're Night Soul consumption characters that buff more. But if you don't have Xiangling or Sitlali, that pretty much leaves you with only 2 other characters that consume Night Soul. Kachina, and that's Ororon. Now, the problem with Kachina and Ororon is that they don't consume nearly enough Night Soul compared to Pyro MC, nor do they consume it as fast. Pyro MC has a total of 136 Night Soul points they can consume over their 12 seconds rotation through like all their abilities and constellations. However, Kachina has a maximum of 80 Night Soul she can consume with her C2 and 60 without it, and some people don't have C2 Kachina. And then Ororon has a total of 90. So if we're going simply off Night Soul consumption alone, Pyro MC completely clears the fuck out of both of them. And then when we add on the actual damage buffing that Pyro MC can do over them, it's not even close. Pyro MC can wield scroll because they are considered an island character, which means in Kachina's case, Pyro MC is giving the same exact buff that Kachina does, so there's 0 reason to ever use Kachina. And then if you combine that with the extra 15% damage bonus you're gonna get because Mavuika is an island character, so you're getting that extra 15% damage bonus from Pyro MC C1, you're now giving 55% damage bonus, which is even better than Kachina or Ororon, with a higher Night Soul consumption. I'd say the one problem, however, is that if you're playing Pyro MC with Mavuika, there is potential for Pyro MC to actually steal Mavuika's reactions because they are doing off-field Pyro. However, in that case, I'd recommend using the hold E instead of the tap E on Pyro MC, because the hold E has slower Pyro application, which means you are less likely to actually steal reactions. Now, it can still happen, so it's something to be wary of, which might potentially make it feel worse. But Mavuika is a character that does so much damage that even if you get reactions stolen once or twice, you should still be fine. Onto the third best option, it's Nuevillette. Of course it is. Who is he not good with at this point? If you don't have the really good 5 stars from Nuevillette, like you don't have the Farina, Xiangling, Kazuha combo, and you have to use a 4-star, I think Pyro MC is just the best 4-star you can use. Obviously, if you already have a VV Shredder on the team, Sucrose would be more valuable than Pyro MC. Assuming you have VV already on the team, Pyro MC is the next best option. Now, this is because bare minimum, Pyro MC is giving 46% damage bonus to Nuevillette, which is really good. However, you add the Pyro application, while it's not very high, it's still Pyro App, which means Nuevillette is still getting occasional vapes. Nuevillette isn't a character that needs to get a vape every hit to do damage. He is not Mualani. He can do damage without even vaping. It's just a nice bonus. If you compare this to the other best 4-star options, what do you really have that would do better than Pyro MC's 46% damage bonus plus occasional vape? Well, we'd have the Animo VV Shred, which I talked about, being Sucrose, for example, if you're running a 4-star on the team, or Kazuha if you have him. Then if you have Farina, you'd run Farina, but if you don't have Farina, then you'd just run Fischl or like any off-field damage dealer, making your team Nuevillette, Sucrose, and then Farina or any real off-field damage dealer. So then what would that 4th slot really be? It used to be Ororon. Ororon was actually a pretty good option in Nuevillette because for the same reason as Pyro MC, he can wield scroll. However, Pyro MC again gives more damage bonus. Yes, it's only 6% more damage bonus, but the fact that you give occasional vapes on top of that just makes it so much better. But again, this is Nuevillette team where you don't have those really good 5 stars, which some people don't. not everyone has Kazuha, not everyone has Xiangling, not everyone has Furina. So it is very important to mention how this character is very good with Nuevillette, especially if you don't need the defensive utility of Dea or Xiangling. Of course, if you have Dea or Xiangling, you can use them instead of Pyro MC to make your Nuevillette not get knocked around. It would just be lower damage, which is the point of this video. I'm talking about raw damage, but yes, technically you could use Dea or Xiangling instead. It would feel more comfortable if you have, you know, problems getting knocked around. And then one thing important to mention is that unlike Xiangling, for example, in a Nuevillette team, who again, it's like Mualani, Xiangling doesn't do much besides Pyro application. Unlike Xiangling, Pyro MC doesn't have that problem of you need to be close to the enemy to apply the Pyro. Pyro MC's hold E has pretty decent range on it, so you can stay back with Nuevillette and you can still do the vapes. You play Nuevillette with Xiangling and it's kind of annoying because you gotta be all up in their face. By doing that, you might eventually get knocked around if you don't have a defensive option. So it's another interesting thing to note that it will feel more comfortable than Xiangling. This is pretty much the same thing as Mualani, where Pyro MC gives more damage and feels more comfortable than Xiangling. That's a trend you'll notice with this character. The fourth team that Pyro MC can be really good in is Kinich's team, because typically in a Kinich team, you really want someone on Deepwood. For example, if you're playing Kinich, Emily, Bennett, Xiangling, or Bennett, Dea, your Kinich can't run Deepwood. He has to be on Obsidian. Your Emily preferably does not run Deepwood because it makes her damage a lot worse, and Emily's role is damage. You want her on that burning set. Your Bennett can't proc Deepwood because he doesn't do anything off field damage wise, so that means your Xiangling has to be on Deepwood. And at that point, if your Xiangling's on Deepwood, what is Xiangling really doing besides Deepwood? Xiangling's not really doing damage, and Xiangling's really high Pyro App doesn't really matter because it's a pure burning team, and you're gonna have burning pretty much permanently without the 0 ICD from Xiangling. So this means that Pyro MC can just swap out with Xiangling and you put Pyro MC on Deepwood and it's just better. Again, it's because Pyro MC has a 15% damage bonus innate in their kit that they give Kinich, which means you will just do more damage, on top of the fact that Kinich has a passive where if a party member triggers a Night Soul burst stacking 2 times, he does like 320% more motion value on his skill, which is massive. And normally you can't get both stacks because, well, you're running Xiangling, running Dea. That's not a Night Soul character. But guess who is? Pyro MC. So yeah, in, for example, like I said, the Kinich, Emily, Bennett, Xiangling team, Pyro MC is just offensively and comfortably a better option. Of course, you might like Dea more if you want the interruption res, you want the tankiness, sure. But I'm speaking about raw damage. Pyro MC is literally the best in slot option there in terms of 4 stars. Again, Mavuika obviously is better than Pyro MC there, but this is a conversation not including Mavuika. Also, regardless, being the second best option behind a limited 5-star, a really good one, is pretty impressive. Like, even if this character is worse than Mavuika, they're better than everybody else. So that's impressive alone. Another thing to note though is that if you try running Pyro MC in this team and instead you run Scroll Set and not Deepwood, it actually cannot proc the second rotation onwards if it's a pure Dendro Pyro team, because for some reason burning is bugged where if you proc Pyro onto an already existing burning aura, you can't actually trigger a reaction. It doesn't give you the damage bonus. So I highly recommend just running Deepwood on Pyro MC. That will definitely buff you the entire time and that will be really good. And of course, in a non-Emily team, like let's say you want to run Kinich, Furina, Bennett, Pyro MC, I still think Pyro MC is very good there. And while you still should run Deepwood, Scroll isn't as annoying because you have Furina to get rid of the burning aura, which means you can then apply Pyro and actually trigger the 40% damage bonus. However, I still think Deepwood outweighs 40% damage bonus, and you should probably always have that on Pyro MC if you're in a Kinich team. Very goated for Kinich, really good option. And then obviously besides these mentioned teams, there are still teams where Pyro MC will perform good. They'll be decent. They won't be the best, but they'll still be decent. Again, they are just supportive Xiangling. So like any team Xiangling works in, unless Xiangling is the damage on that team, Pyro MC will work as well. Will they be as good? It depends on the team, but they will be a good option. This character is not completely useless like some people have been saying. This character is actually pretty useful. Sucrose is a character that's glazed to high hell, and she's literally just 4-star Kazuha. But the fact that she's 4-star Kazuha is what makes Sucrose so good, because not everyone has Kazuha. A lot more people have Sucrose. So I think a character being a 4-star is extremely important. And this character isn't just a 4-star. They're a free C6 4-star. You get all constellations for free. There are some 4-stars, for example, Xiangling, that you don't get their constellations for free. There's some people who don't have C4 Xiangling yet. And if Xiangling isn't C4, she's not as good. She feels a lot worse. So I think this character has has been super slept on, and people are gonna realize after a while that this character is actually pretty good. I don't know if they're, for example, as good as Dendro MC was, because Dendro MC was pretty good at the time, but I think this character is definitely not a Hydro MC. They're not an Electro MC. They're very useful in a lot of teams, whether it's simply because scroll buff is broken or because off-field Pyro is so underutilized in this game. Hey, that's up to you, but try this character out when the patch drops. Trust me, they're not as bad as people think.